And welcome back to Square Off. Governor Doug Ducey picks a new leader in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, and an Arizona Supreme Court ruling raises new questions about a law that could put a limit on school funding. Let's welcome our political insiders. Julie Erfle is a communications consultant at Erfle Uncuffed, and Marcus Dell Artino is a partner at First Strategic Communications and Public Affairs here in Phoenix. Good to see you both.
It's great to be with you, Graham. Thank you.
Let's start with the big changes at the Arizona Department of Health Services. Dr. Kara Christ resigned as director after 6 years on the job. Governor Ducey installed Don Harrington as interim director. He's a 20-year veteran administrator at DHS. But the more significant news is the hiring of Dr. Richard Carmona, former U.S. Surgeon General and U.S. Senate candidate in Arizona, as a special advisor to lead the COVID-19 response. Carmona is working on a contract basis at a rate of $400 an hour, that according to DHS. On this show just 3 weeks ago, former Public Health Director Will Humble said Carmona would be a perfect choice to replace Kara Christ, but he doubted Ducey would hire him because Carmona has a reputation as being quite outspoken, as we know. Julie, what does this hiring tell us about how Ducey views the pandemic response?
Well, I don't know that it tells us as much as we think it does. I mean, I was really hopeful when I saw the news as well, but then seeing an op-ed that Dr. Carmona wrote not that long ago, and then hearing again this week from news reports that Dr. Carmona is basically saying, hey, our response so far has been successful, which I question whether our response has been successful, and that he's going to focus strictly on vaccines, and he's not going to get involved in any of the politics of masking or anything else. I think it's really just going to be more of the same, to be totally honest, which is unfortunate. But, you know, the governor has a habit of hiring people who are yes men, frankly, and really he's not really looking for independent thinkers. And I think this is another example of that. I think Dr. Carmona will just simply extend what we've already seen at the department.
Marcus, do you think Carmona will be different from what we've seen?
Yeah, I think if you were looking for a yes man, you've definitely picked the wrong guy in Richard Carmona. I mean, his record stands for himself. He's been quite outspoken. He was outspoken against his former boss in the Bush administration as the Surgeon General. So I think he's really he's going to be outspoken. Whether that translates into policy shifts or changes is another question. But he headed up U of A's COVID response, and obviously they've done some very innovative things down there in handling the response. And I expect good things out of Richard Carmona. I have utmost respect for him.
And I do want to go back to that op-ed, Julie, that was written under Richard Carmona's name back in May in the Arizona Republic. And here's the language he used, quote, "If the lockdown left is unhappy and COVID-denying conservatives are unhappy, then you're probably in the right spot." And he is, referring to Doug Ducey. You know, I covered Richard Carmona's Senate campaign back in 2012, followed him after that. I had a hard time believing that Richard Carmona wrote those words. And we all know how words written under somebody's name in an op-ed often aren't their words. Do you really think Richard Carmona said that, Marcus?
It struck me as a bit strange, to be honest with you, and the style of writing seemed a bit different to me. I certainly think that there is more to the story. I will say this, though, that there's never any good answers in a pandemic, and I think we've lost track of that. There are only some mildly better choices, but no great choices. And so I do think he's going to struggle a little bit with this op-ed and answering it, as we're seeing this morning, as a matter of fact.
All right. I want to move on now to an obscure 40-year-old law that limits how much money Arizona can spend on K-12 school funding. A recent Arizona Supreme Court ruling on Prop 208 drew attention to that law. And what we learned was Arizona is bumping up against that ceiling on school funding, and it could cost schools hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Julie Erfle, I'm going to call on you. You wrote about this in the Arizona Mirror. You have a column there. Give us the simple, cocktail conversation on what the ceiling is all about and why it matters right now.
Right. So this was a ceiling that was created back in 1980. It was approved by the voters, and basically it doesn't allow our expenditures to exceed much beyond our 1980 expenditures. It does have a for more students and for inflation, there are some increases allowed, but by and large, we're still spending back the way we were in 1980, which 1980 schools and 2021 schools don't look anything alike. And we shouldn't want our students to go back in time 40 years when they go to school. We want them to have computer labs and updated technology and security. So this is a problem because we have been regularly, as we backfilled all of the cuts from the Great Recession, we have been coming very close to this expenditure cap. And now with the extension of Prop 301, and of course with 208, we are going to exceed that cap. So if we don't either take this back to the voters and ask them to greatly increase the cap or get rid of it altogether, we're going to be stuck at last in nation funding for our students. And that is not a place that voters want to be.
And Marcus, Julie raises the interesting point. This was approved by voters, so it has to go back to voters. The legislature has grappled with this in the past. How did that turn out?
It was obviously difficult. As you can see from this entire conversation, this is really policy that's in the weeds. Here's where it's going, most importantly. I think you're going to see two ballot initiatives in this next cycle dealing with this exact issue. One that'll be from the conservatives and one that'll be from the liberals, or the Democrats and the Republicans. Either way you want to discuss it, but I think you're looking at least two ballot initiatives to solve this problem. And in addition to that, I predict that we will have unprecedented spending in school board elections this next cycle, as you're watching education increasingly become the top issue in the state. Everywhere, and we're looking at these school boards in the news daily.
And that's a larger issue than just hitting a spending ceiling. I want to end this with you, Julie. Is there any chance a court could settle this as it takes a final look at the Prop 208 decision that the Supreme Court tossed back to it?
The trial court could definitely overturn what happened at the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court didn't take into account how the law is currently written. So for instance, if we do go beyond the expenditure limit, those excess funds do not sit in the treasurer's office, as the Supreme Court indicated. They are released to school boards, and it is actually up to school boards to determine how they want to use excess funds, or which excess funds they will use and which ones they put aside. So they could decide, for instance, to use the money from Prop 208, but not money from district additional assistance. So I do anticipate actually that the lower court may overturn what happened at the Supreme Court for that reason.
Okay, now that'll play out over the next several months. I like to end the show with our guests telling us something good. Marcus, I'll start with you.
Well, Bram, all this rain that we've been receiving from these monsoons has actually moved a number of Arizona counties down in their extreme drought category. So they've literally gone from a level 4 to a level 2, and there's more rain coming next week, as I explain, or as I hear. So I'm excited about that. All
right, pray for rain, Julie.
That is good news. The other good news that I would point to is the child tax credits. These could be made permanent in the Democrats' social infrastructure plan, as they're calling it, and these are expected to take more than half of our kids out of childhood poverty, which is excellent news for people that really care about kids.
All right, Marcus, Dell, Artino, Julie, Erfle, thanks so much for joining us.